He's an entertainer, like the president.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like that's part of why progressives, back when he was doing the chalkboard routine, loved to hate watch him, because
It's fascinating.
Yeah, exactly, right? And I think that really comes out in this book,
Yes.
because as absurd as the arguments are, we'll get to that. It is also the case that it's a very entertaining read, especially I would imagine if you don't come into it with some sense of like what he's saying is so ridiculous. It's full of cartoons.
I mean, he made very compelling television. In many ways, his similarities to the president are strong because, Trump is just fascinating to watch and is funny and is charismatic, even as the things that he is saying are just completely divorced from reality, and even as his agenda is really horrifying. This is why Glenn Beck rose so quickly, and he started on CNN. This is the crazy thing. Like, he had a CNN headline news show because they knew he'd get ratings, and he did. And then he found his natural home on Fox. His ratings were very good on Fox, and eventually they parted ways because I think he, said too many controversial things and the advertisers started pulling out. And he also didn't want even Fox telling him what to do. So he went on to found his own media empire, The Blaze, which has kind of foundered, but also still has, as we say, a lot of money and quite an audience. And he's just a book factory. And he puts out tons of these books. And the thing that struck me and why I wanted to, when I got it, I really wanted to review it with you is that, like, it is unique in that it does kind of some of what we do at Current Affairs, where it combines visual design with arguments. And so he has all this pseudo argumentation. It's set up like it's a school notebook or a textbook with all these like discussion questions and all these little sidebars and pop quizzes and cartoons. And he just throws everything in, and it's actually a fascinating product. And from a design perspective, it's incredibly well designed and well put together.
Yeah, it's set up kind of as a imitation of like a middle school social studies kind of textbook. That's basically what it looks like, but it's a much more irreverent version of that. So the textbook layout makes it look very accessible. The humor, even though a lot of it is
the humor
sort of. So a lot of it is about, these kind of racist caricatures and things like that, but also, also a lot of the humor, even when it's kind of groan-worthy dad jokes, is the sort of thing that puts people at ease. And so I think there's a lot that could be learned from it just as propaganda.
Yeah.
And I think it's also worth noting that the mainstream media and liberals have been very credulous about Beck. That obviously,
yes,
yeah,
that's such an important point, and one that we bring up in the review is that from CNN giving Beck a spot as like a mainstream commentator to what happened a couple of years ago in 2016, where Beck did this kind of very brief attempt to give himself this publicity makeover. In which he said, I'm the new Glenn Beck, I'm reformed, I'm no longer the crazy chalkboard guy, I want everyone to love each other, I believe in just reason and dialogue and bipartisanship. And they swallowed it hook, line, and sinker. And there were all these profiles going like the new reformed Glenn Beck. He's reflected on the damage he's done. Samantha Bee had him on and they both wore Christmas sweaters and they had cups of tea and they talked about how they both didn't like Trump. But clearly that didn't make much money for him because he immediately reverted into, like, his coronavirus stuff has been really it has been fully like, as many people need to die to keep the economy going as necessary. And this book, of course, just traffics in vicious anti-socialist stereotypes and has no interest whatsoever in taking the arguments actually seriously. And it's just a pure piece of propaganda for the worst kind of laissez-faire capitalism and the dismantling of the welfare state.
Yeah, he's really reverted to vintage Beck in this book. Right?
Yeah.
he's come all the way back around. And I think that it's, I think this is worth noting. I mean, obviously, the Samantha Bee thing says something about how the strange hunger among liberals for somebody they can think of as a reasonable reactionary.
The search for the reasonable conservative continues.
Yeah, exactly, right. Like, there's a reason that for about like 5 years before John McCain ran for president in 2008 and everything suddenly reversed, he was like Jon Stewart's favorite guest on The Daily Show, right? He loved John McCain. And even somebody like Beck, right? I mean, like, there's no reason he couldn't just join the parade of Republican ghouls from the Bush administration and that era who have been accepted with open arms into the anti-Trump resistance, except that he kind of stuck a toe in those waters, realized that there wasn't as big an audience for it as he hoped there would be, and just went back to his usual bullshit. But in the book, right, this I like that you mentioned his coronavirus commentary, because actually I thought one of the most unintentionally and grimly funny things in it is at the end he talks about how much better everything has gotten in the last 100 years thanks to capitalism.
Oh, God, yeah.
And one of his examples is, oh, look at what was going on 100 years ago. The Spanish flu was killing all these people. Things have advanced so much since then. And also the business about how there are toilet paper shortages in Venezuela. Can you imagine that? It doesn't age well either. But in general, what you get from this book is a couple things, right? So one of them is a lot of not wanting to make distinctions between liberals and socialists.
Right.
So he'll use a lot of phrases like progressives and socialists say X, right? Progressives and socialists what Y. And so, in fact, one of the people on the cover of the book, I believe, is Elizabeth Warren, right? Who famously described herself as capitalist to her bones. But she's somehow on the cover of a book called Argue with Socialists. And this isn't, of course, look, this is like standard right-wing stuff, not to make a lot of distinctions among people who disagree with them. This particularly standard Glenn Beck stuff, right? Back in the chalkboard era, he was literally arguing that there was a lines from like the Obama administration to the Weather Underground, right? So he certainly wasn't making a lot of distinctions between shades of opinion to his left. But I think the reason it maybe matters as far as the arguments in the book is that he doesn't really have a lot that he could say to explain, for example, why the healthcare policy that socialists actually want, which is single payer, would be bad. So instead, he spends a lot of time in a book called Argue with Socialists explaining why Obamacare is bad. Right. And if he'd ever actually argued with the socialists, the first thing they would tell him is, yeah, we hate that, right? Like, this is not all what we want.
Yes. And I want to, because your audience might wonder, and I think every time I write about a horrible conservative, if I get too quickly into why they're wrong and stupid, my audience, your audience probably goes, well, of course they're wrong and stupid. Oh, you're shocked that they misrepresent. I think one of the things that we dwell on in the review, and again, that is the subject of your give them an argument, why you actually have to respond to this stuff, why it's worth going through and pointing out these distinctions, is I do want to emphasize again how well put together even the arguments, even though they're wrong, they're very well organized, right? They're very like, let's go through the environmental policies. Let's go through the Green New Deal. He has like a long section about modern monetary theory. And even though for most of the book, he is quite literally arguing with straw socialists, right? They make up these little cartoon imaginary
he has
socialists.
These fake Twitter handles that are things like Rashida Resistance, or my
and you
personal
mentioned
favorite,
Clay Guevara, who is
Clay
literally
Guevara.
like a stone, like a made-up.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, you might as well just call this fictional Twitter user
Strawman
Socialist 1917.
Although I will say, the one called Professor Tweed does not look completely unlike you. I'm not saying he looks exactly like you, but I'm saying that Professor Tweed but he doesn't use any real quotes, right? He makes up what he thinks Mr. Professor Tweed would say if he were here, which he isn't. But then at the same time, they've got footnotes in some of it. Like the MMT section does have some quotes, but for the most part, the only socialists you hear from are like, a quote from AOC here and there.
Yeah, the quotes that you see from socialists all have very much the feel to them of probably not even one of the people who's listed on in the inside of the book, but like an intern or somebody who's working for one of these people, being given an assignment like, oh, we're going to talk in this part about privacy and government power. Find a quote to like illustrate this, right? Find a quote from a socialist saying that they want Green New Deal so we can like open up the environmental thing, because the arguments themselves always have kind of a tenuous relationship to the quotes. The quotes are there to set them up. And I guess at some point they decided that if they only had like fake tweets from cartoon socialists, then it would be too disconnected from what the opponents they're supposedly arguing about would say. But yeah, I like that you raised this question about why it is that like, okay, because it's a very natural response. Say, look, yeah, Glenn Beck is a lunatic. We all know this. Why are you even wasting your time on this? And I think that a key part of the response is, yeah, we know that, right? But the point isn't to convince people who are already leftists or socialists. The point is to give people who already agree with us the tools with which they can argue with people who don't, right? Or ideally, of course, if we could get them to read current affairs, get the people who might be marks, for what Beck is doing to read it. But at the very least, that if we could get people on our side to have a better sense of how to respond to this argument, then indirectly, right, we can address all the people who are a legion who are persuadable by this stuff.